check it. Oh, where's my phone? Oh, the phone's over there. All right, let me send a notice out to everybody. Let's see where we are. Oh my God, so much. All right, Facebook. Just checking. We are online. That's good. Success. Okay, now we'll chant a little bit. Madhya se samsara vitare mune raruni to me abhijamare tomare laiti amme oino avatara amivena bandhuara Caitanya ene je shoni maya natsivaruna harinam mantra now to me mani vakati vinona prabhu Charane Bodhiya Devani Nama Mantra Lailulukiya Jijado Rachanda Bodhi Janitra Yamaya Sach Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Krishna, 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 Hare Rama, 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 Hare Krishna, Krishna. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivakacharya also Tada Satishi Shimad. His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantagoti Vaishnava Vrind Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Macharanam Ki Jai Jagadasami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrind Ki Jai Go Premananda Hari 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 Om. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste, Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pacharni, Nivashesha Shanyavadi Paschacha, Deja Tarine. All right. So Omagana Timidanda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Meditan Yena Tasmai Shigurveda. Offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual masters, Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So tonight I'm still giving class from New Orleans. Tomorrow night we will be hopefully back in New Goloka, giving class from there. And that's tomorrow and Sunday night or morning and Monday for those of you in Australia and New Zealand. And then Monday we are going to Chicago. Monday and Tuesday we're going to be in Chicago. And Wednesday we will be back. Okay, and we'll be giving class every day, and there'll be some special treats online for all of you. Anyway, we will explain that later. So, we're reading from the Caitanya Caritamrta, the 10th chapter of the Madhya Lila, and I believe it's text 117, sorry. Text 117. We're reading from, and this text, or this particular chapter, details Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returning to Jagannath Puri and some of the things that occurred when he returned to Jagannath Puri from his trip to South India. So now let us share the screen so we can continue with our reading of the Caitanya Caritamrta. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. All right. Advaita Nichandra Parama Priyatama Shivasari Bhakta Janera Haya Prana Sama. Sri Swarup Damodar was very dear to Advaita Acharya Nityananda Prabhu, and he was the life and soul of all the devotees headed by Srivas Thakur. Se Damodara Si Dandavat Hoila Chanane Padya Shloka. Oops, sorry, went a little too far. Padita Lagila. When Swarup Damodar came to Jagannath Puri, he fell flat before the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, offering him obeisances and reciting the verse. So, as we mentioned yesterday, Swarup Damodar Goswami was a class friend of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he was a sannyasi, although he maintained his brahmachari name. That's very important, and we gave a whole story about that yesterday. And what else? He is the appearance of Lalita Devi, because Lord Srimati Radharani has two most intimate associates in her pastimes with Krishna. And those associates are Lalita and Vishaka. Vishaka is manifest as Ramananda Roy. Lalita is manifest as Swarup Damodar Goswami in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. Helo Dunita Kedaya Vishadaya Pron Milad Anmodaya Ashamyat Shastra Vivadaya Rasadaya Chitar Piton Madaya Shasvad Bhakti Vinodaya Samadaya Madhurya Maryadaya Shri Chaitanya Daya Nide Tava Daya Buyad Anando Daya. O ocean of mercy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, let there be an awakening of your auspicious mercy which easily drives away all kinds of material lamentation by making everything pure and blissful. Indeed, your mercy awakens transcendental bliss and covers all material pleasures. By your auspicious mercy, quarrels and disagreements arising among different scriptures are vanquished. Your auspicious mercy pours forth transcendental mellows and thus causes the heart to jubilate. It's an interesting word, jubilate. Haven't heard that word much. That means to feel jubilation. Your mercy, which is full of joy, always stimulates devotional service and glorifies conjugal love of God. May transcendental bliss be awakened within my heart by your causeless mercy. So Prabhupada comments that this important verse, this is from the Sri Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka 810, specifically describes the Lord's causeless mercy. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the most magnanimous personality of Godhead, distributes his causeless mercy in three ways to the conditioned soul. Wow, let's hear about this. 3 ways we can get his mercy. Every living entity is morose in the material world because he is always in want. What is he in want of? He's in want of a loving relationship with Krishna. And the loving relationships in this world, there's a limit to them. Prabhupada gave the examples like shining a light inside a box. Boom! It doesn't go very far. But if you shine a light, particularly a laser beam, Prabhupada didn't talk about laser beams. But anyway, if you shine a light in the sky, it goes on forever and ever, never, 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 never. So that's how we want our loving expressions and propensity to be expressed. And unfortunately, when we invested in our dog or material relationships, it's like hitting a brick wall. What does that mean, hitting a brick wall? You're driving your car, and all of a sudden, boom, you go from 80 to 0 in less than half a second, or less than a tenth of a second. That's why people keep changing things, or changing relationships, or changing partners, or changing friends, because of Chapalasuka. Chapalasuka means flickering happiness, or also because of Punas Charapita Charapan, and I'm chewing the chewed, and also because of Boga Tiaga. I mean, for example, like people eat different types of food every night because they need the variety. But one who is absorbed in eating prasadam, they can have the same food every night because they're feeling Krishna's mercy. They're tasting Krishna's mercy, which is ultimately unlimitedly has unlimited manifestations of variety. Okay, 3 ways. Let's read about this. Every living entity is morose in the material world because always in want. Like morose. He undergoes a great struggle for existence and tries to minimize his miserable condition by squeezing, ooh, what a word Prabhupada uses, the utmost pleasure out of this world. It's like another example I'm going to use. Of course, Prabhupada used the word squeeze. It's just like you have a toothpaste and all the toothpaste is gone. I'm sure you've experienced this. And just keep squeezing the toothpaste, the tube of toothpaste, of course, not the toothpaste itself. And just, can't get any out of there. That's the material world. Squeezing the utmost pleasure out of this world. But the living entity is never successful in this endeavor, believe it. While in a miserable condition, a person sometimes seeks the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but this is very difficult for materialistic people to obtain. However, when one becomes Krishna conscious by the grace of the Lord, the fragrance of the lotus feet of the Lord expands. Wow, what a poetic expression. Fragrance. If you don't know what fragrance means, it means a smell. But smell is actually not such a nice word. So fragrant, something very fragrant. Just like if you're praising some smell, you don't say it's very smelly. You say it's very fragrant. Anyway, the lotus feet of the Lord expands. This way, materialist may gain freedom from his miseries. Actually, his mind is cleansed by his transcendental connection with the lotus feet of the Lord. At such a time, one is enlightened by the loving service of the Lord. There are many different kinds of scriptures, and by reading them, one often becomes puzzled. But when one receives the mercy of the Lord, his confusion is mitigated. Not only are scriptural disparities resolved, but a kind of transcendental bliss is awakened, and in this way, one is fully satisfied. The transcendental loving service of the Lord constantly engages the conditioned soul in serving the Lord's lotus feet. Through such fortunate engagement, one's transcendental love for Krishna is increased. One's position is thus completely purified, and one is filled with transcendental bliss, accompanied by the spirit soul's jubilation. Thus, the transcendental causeless mercy of Lord Krishna is manifested in the heart of a devotee. At such a time, material needs no longer exist. Wow. The lamentation that invariably accompanies material desires also vanishes. So lamentation, akangshati, sochati. We're lamenting and we're hankering. Brahmabhuta prasanatna, nakangshati, nashoshati, kangshati. One who is actually spiritually situated doesn't hanker or lament. Oh, I lost this. Oh my goodness. Or I really want this. I gotta have it. You know, people think like that. I gotta have this. I gotta have it. I gotta get that. If you think too much of what you want to have and you ask Krishna for it, you may get too much of it. Just like the story of Draupadi. In her previous life, she was worshiping Lord Shiva, and she really wanted a husband. Be careful of this, you young girls. And so Lord Shiva came in and said to her, My dear devotee, what blessing would you like? And she said, I want a husband, 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 I want a husband. And Lord Shiva said, okay, you get 5 of them. You got to be careful what you ask for. By the grace of the Lord, one is elevated to the transcendental position, and then the transcendental mellows of the spiritual world are manifest in him. That means the tastes of the relationships in the spiritual world. One's devotional service then becomes firm, and one engages in the Lord's transcendental loving service with great determination. All these combine to fully awaken the devotee's heart with love of Krishna. In the beginning, a conditioned soul is bereft of Krishna consciousness and is always morose in his material activities. Morose, and an antidepressant is not going to solve it. Later, by associating with a pure devotee, one becomes inquisitive to know the absolute truth. In this way, one begins to engage in the transcendental service of the Lord. Next, by the Lord's grace, all misconceptions are vanquished and the heart is cleansed of all material dirt. It is only then that the pleasure of transcendental bliss is awakened. By the Lord's mercy, one is completely convinced of the value of devotional service. When one can see the pastimes of the Lord everywhere, he is firmly situated in transcendental bliss. Such a devotee is relieved of all kinds of material desires, and he preaches the glories of the Lord all over the world. These Krishna-conscious activities separate him from material activities and the desire for liberation, because at every step, the devotee feels himself connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although such a devotee may sometimes be involved in household life, he is untouched by material existence due to his constant engagement in devotional service. Thus, everyone is advised to take shelter of devotional service to become happy and liberated. And unless you take shelter of devotional service, you will be agitated. Bhukti mukti siddhikam sakaleya shanta. Described by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, if one wants gross things in this world, that means things that are tangible, empirical things. Bhukti, or mukti, or liberation, or one wants power. Just like I have one disciple who just like is hankering to be a superhero and have superpowers. And he's so much hankering to have this, I'm not going to mention his name, that he even has a cell phone with a Spider-Man on it, and probably has a bead bag with a Wonder Woman on it or something like that. But bhukti mukti siddhi kam. As long as one has these desires for bhukti mukti, or powers, especially yogic powers this verse refers to, then sakale ashanta. So that means one is not peaceful. Shanta means, or shanti means to be peaceful. Ashanta means to be agitated. I need this. I want this. I want bhukti or bhukti. So anyway, Krishna bhakta nishkamata eva shanta. And so the final portion of the verse is, if one has love for Krishna, then one will be peaceful. Because without peace, you can't be happy. If your mind is agitated, how can you be happy? You may say, my mind's not agitated. I'm sleeping all the time. Well, that's not happiness. That's not positive. That's a negation of the distress for some time, but it's not happiness. Happiness is a positive commodity. Utana Mahaprabhu Kaila Lingana Dvijane Primaveshe Haila Chaitana. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu raised Swarup Damodar to his feet and embraced him. They both became ecstatic, in love, and fell unconscious. Kaltak Shane Dvijane Stiraya Behaila Tabe Mahaprabhu Tandre Kahite Lagila. After they had regained their patience, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to speak. Tumiye asibe, aji swapne te dekila, bala haila andayena, dui netra paila. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I saw in a dream that you were coming, and so this is very auspicious. I have been like a blind man, but your coming here restores my vision. So one thing you'll see here is that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is acting as a devotee, even though he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, acting as devotees, and he's showing the love that devotees should have for each other. This is very important, to have deep, 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 loving relationships between the devotees. We may have some philosophical discussions sometimes, but we should have loving relationships. Swarupakahi Prabhu Morakshama Aparada Tomachadi Anyatragenu Karinu Pramada. Swarup said, "My dear Lord, please excuse my offense. I gave up your company to go elsewhere, and that was my great mistake." Elsewhere refers to when he took sannyas. Tomara Chadane Mora. And the reason he took sannyas is he saw that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, and he just went out wild and found Chaitanananda Bharati as his sannyas guru. It's interesting. And then he took sannyas from him. Tomara Chadane Mora Nahi Prema Lesha Toma Chari Papi. Whoops. Muni Genu Hanya Desha. My dear Lord, I do not possess even a trace of love for your lotus feet. If I did, how could I have gone to another country? It's not that he left India, but he went to Varanasi. I am therefore a most sinful man. Muni Toma Charila Mutumi Morena Chadila Kripa Pasha Gale Bandi Chadane Hanila. I gave up your company, but you did not give me up. By the rope of mercy you have bound me by the neck and brought me back again to your lotus feet. Tabe Swarupakaila Nitayra Charana Vandana Nichananda Prabhu Kaila Prema Alingana. Swarup Damodar then worshipped the lotus feet of Nityananda Prabhu, and Nityananda Prabhu in turn embraced him in the ecstasy of love. Jagadananda Mukunda Shankara Sarvamoma Sabhasange Yata Yogya Karila Milana. After worshipping Nityananda Prabhu, Swarup Damodar met Jagadananda Mukunda Shankara and Sarvabhauma, as was befitting. Paramananda Purira Kaila Chandana Vantana Puri Goshani Tanre Kaila Prema Lingana. Swarup Damodar also offered his worshipful prayers at the lotus feet of Paramananda Puri, who in return embraced him in ecstatic love. Mahaprabhu Dila Tanre Nibriteva Sagara Jalari Paricharya Lagi Dila Eka Kinkara. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then gave Swarup Damodar residence in a solitary place and ordered a servant to serve him with a supply of water and other necessities. Now, one thing you'll notice in this portion of the Chaitanya Charitamrta, when Lord Chaitanya returns to Jagannath Puri, there's like a gathering of all of his eternal associates, who are also Brajavasis. In Kavi Karnapur's book, which describes, Kavi Karnapur describes in his literature who these personalities were in the Gora, Ganadesh, Dipika, in Krishna Lila. So it's like Krishna coming to Vrindavan. Of course, Jagannath Puri is not exactly like Vrindavan, but it's like Krishna coming to Vrindavan and all of his associates coming to meet him. Aradina Sarvabhauma Hari Bhakta Gatsange Avashya Chena Mahaprabhu Krishna Kata Range. The next day, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat with all the devotees headed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and they discussed the pastimes of Krishna. Hena Kale Govindera Haila Gamada Dandavat Kari Kahe Vinaya Vachana. At that time, Govinda appeared on the scene, offered his respectful obeisances, and spoke submissively. Ishvara Purira Bricha Govinda Moranam Puri Goshanira Agyaya Ainu Tumarastan. I am the servant of Ishvara Puri. My name is Govinda, and following the orders of my spiritual master, I have come here. Of course, Ishvara Puri is the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so Govinda was the personal servant of Ishvara Puri, And Govinda was ordered by Ishwara Puri to serve Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now we'll see here that it's not proper to have one's godbrother become one's servant. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was mulling over this fact in the next few verses. Siddha Prapti Kale Goshanir Goshani Agya Kaila More Krishna Chaitanya Nikati Rahi Seviha Tanhare. Just before his departure from this mortal world to attain the highest perfection, Ishwara Puri told me that I should go to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and render service unto him. Kashishvara Asibena Sabatirta Dekiya Prabhu Gyaya Muni Ainu Toma Paridana. Kashishvara will also come here after visiting all the holy places. However, following the orders of my spiritual master, I have hastily come to be present at your lotus feet. Goshani Kahila Purishvara Vatsalya Kare More Kripa Karimora Tani Puthaila Tomare. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, my spiritual master Ishwara Puri always favors me with paternal affection. Therefore, out of his causeless mercy, he has sent you here. Eta Shuni Sarvavoma Prabhuri Puchila Puri Goshani Shudra Sevaka Kanhe Ta Rakila. After hearing this, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, why did Ishwara Puri keep a servant who comes from a Shudra family? Ooh, Varnashram here again. Both Kashishvara and Govinda were personal servants of Ishwara Puri. After Ishwara Puri's demise, Kashishvara went to visit all the holy places of India, following the orders of his spiritual master. Govinda immediately went to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for shelter. Govinda came from a Shudra family, but because he was initiated by Ishwara Puri, he was certainly a Brahmana. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya here asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu why Ishwara Puri accepted a disciple from a Shudra family. According to the Smriti Shastra, you and some devotees are trying to bring these into ISKCON now, which gives direction for the management of the Varnashram institution. A Brahmana cannot accept a disciple from the lower caste. In other words, a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra cannot be accepted as a servant. If a spiritual master accepts such a person, he is contaminated. Sarvabhauma, because these are just external materialistic rules that have nothing to do with Vaishnavism. Because what the swa pachato gariyan yaji vagre vartate namatubhyam tapastapus jehuva sarsana aryar brahmanuchar nama granantiyate. This verse is there. How wonderful it is that if one is chanting the holy names, even if one is born in the family of Swapachatogariyan, in the family of a dog eater, then it's understood he's come to the platform of being a Brahmin and he's performed all the preliminary rituals that will actually be required. So, wait to raise your hand, where it's not the time for questions. So, let's go back. Cannot be accepted. If a spiritual master, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya therefore asked why Ishwara Puri accepted a servant and disciple born in Shudra family. In answer to this question, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied that his spiritual master Ishwara Puri was so empowered that he was good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As such, Ishwara Puri was the spiritual master of the whole world. He was not a servant of any mundane rule or regulation. An empowered spiritual master like Ishwara Puri can bestow his mercy upon anyone, irrespective of caste or creed. The conclusion is that an empowered spiritual master is authorized by Krishna and his own guru and should therefore be considered as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. This is the verdict, or that is the verdict of Vishwanath Chakrabarti. Sakshad Dhari Tvena. An authorized spiritual master is as good as Hari. Now, it doesn't mean he's become God, but he's respected as a representative of God, and he's been empowered by the Supreme Personality of God. He's been given superpowers, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Hari is free to act as he likes, the empowered spiritual master is also free. As Hari is not subject to mundane rules and regulations, the spiritual master empowered by him is also not subject. So the mundane rules and regulations mentioned here are parts of the Vedic literatures, which this part is called the Smriti Shastras, which give details for those people who are not Krishna conscious. So one has to understand what injunctions to apply and what injunctions not to apply based upon our acharyas, specifically one spiritual master. So there's many injunctions in the Vedic literatures that we don't apply. I mean, there's one injunction: the sannyasis, as I mentioned many times before, are supposed to wear their birthday suits all the time. That means stark naked. We don't follow that one. That would be really bad. So according to the Caitanya Caritamrta Ansha Lila 7:11, that's good, 7:11, Krishna Shakti Bina Nahi Tara Pravartana, an authorized spiritual master empowered by Krishna can spread the glories of the holy name of the Lord, for he has the power of attorney from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the mundane world, anyone possessing his master's power of attorney can act on behalf of his master. Similarly, a spiritual master empowered by Krishna through his own bona fide spiritual master should be considered as good as the Supreme Personality of God himself. This is the meaning of Shakshat Daritrena. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu therefore describes the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the bona fide spiritual master as follows. Prabhu Kahe, because basically Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was actually raised and had the opinion in many cases, even though he was a pure devotee at that point, he had the opinion that was very similar, or opinions that were very similar to those who were ritualistic brahmanas. Prabhu Kahe Ishwarahaya Parama Swatantra Ishwarera Kripa Nahe Veda Paratantra. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and my spiritual master Ishvara Puri are completely independent. Therefore, neither the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead nor that of Ishvara Puri is subject to any Vedic rules and regulations. Ishvarera Kripa Jati Kuladi Namane Vidurera Gare Krishna Karila Bhojane. The mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not restricted to the jurisdiction of caste and creed, nor gender. Vidura was a Shudra, yet Krishna accepted lunch at his home. Sneha Lishak Beksha Matra Shri Krishna Kripara Sneha Vashahana Kariswa Tantra Achara. Lord Krishna's mercy is dependent only on affection. Being obliged only by affection, Lord Krishna acts very independently. Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is merciful, but his mercy does not depend on mundane rules and regulations. He is dependent only on affection and nothing else. Service to Lord Krishna can be rendered in two ways. One can serve the Lord in affection or in veneration. When service is rendered in affection, it is the Lord's special mercy. When service is rendered in veneration, it is doubtful whether Krishna's mercy is actually involved. Wow, that's a heavy statement. Veneration means awe and reverence, and rules and regulations and fear. Not that we give up the rules and regulations. We follow the rules and regulations because we love Krishna, not because they're rules and regulations. And we understand certain rules and regulations are not applicable because they will interfere with Krishna's service. We're not talking about the 4 regular principles right now. We're talking about certain smriti rules and regulations. The whole point is to serve Krishna and please Krishna. For example, and don't follow this, one time Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur even fed his disciples rice on Ekadasi to get them to go out and preach Krishna consciousness. Now, of course, that's really radical. We don't need to do that because we have kasha, we have quinoa, there's so many things that we can eat on Ekadasi to give us energy so we can preach. Anyway, that's a heavy sentence. When service is rendered in veneration, it is doubtful whether Krishna's mercy is actually involved. If Krishna's mercy is there, it is not dependent on any prescribed caste or creed. Really important point. or gender or anything like that. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to inform Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that Lord Krishna is the spiritual master of everyone and does not care for mundane caste or creed. Wow, so important. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cited the example of Lord Krishna's accepting food at the house of Vidura, who was a Shudra by birth. By the same token, Ishvara Puri, an empowered spiritual master, could show mercy to anyone. As such, he accepted Govinda, although the boy was born in a Shudra family. When Govinda was initiated, he became a Brahmin. Wow. And actually, if you're not initiated, you ain't a Brahmin. Wow. Janmana jayate Shudra. Samskara bhavet tvijam. That's what the Vedas say. By birth, you are a Shudra. A Brahmin is one who knows Brahman. So how can you be a Brahmin if you don't know Brahman? And how can you know Brahman without being initiated and following a bona fide spiritual master? Common sense. Prabhu. He became a Brahmin and was accepted as Ishwara Puri's personal servant. In the Hari Bhakti Vilasa, Srila Sanatana Goswami, or Sri Sanatana Goswami, states that one who is initiated by a bona fide spiritual master immediately becomes a Brahmana. A pseudo-spiritual master cannot transform a person to a Brahmana, but an authorized spiritual master can do so. This is the verdict of Shastra, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and all the Goswamis. Wow. Maryada haite koti sukasneha charane paramananda hayayara nama shravane. In conclusion, dealings in affection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead bring happiness many millions of times greater than dealings with Him in awe and veneration. Simply by hearing, millions of times greater. Simply by hearing the holy name of the Lord, a devotee is merged in transcendental bliss. Whew. I wish I could be merged in transcendental bliss. Etabali govindere Kaila Linkana Govinda Karila Prabhura Charana Vandana. After saying this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced Govinda, and Govinda in turn offered his respectful obeisances unto Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet. So let me give this scenario. This is a very ritualistic society in which Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in at that particular point. And ritualistic society meant that even you wouldn't allow someone born in a Shudra family to step on your shadow. That was a major offense, according to the ritualistic nonsense people. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did something that was incredible in the eyes of the people who were watching, particularly Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He embraced this person who was born in a Shudra family. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was making the point that one takes initiation, it doesn't matter. One sees a Vaishnava according to his birth, according to past activities, that is very sinful. One should not consider a Vaishnava according to past activities, accidental fall down, or anything like that. Prabhu kahe bhattacharya karaha vichara gurura kinkara hoya Manya se amara. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then continued speaking to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Consider this point. The servant of the spiritual master is always respectable for me. So in other words, he's making the point that Govinda is the servant of his spiritual master. So Lord Chaitanya is going to say, this is not really proper for me to accept Govinda as my servant. So, Tanhare apana seva karai tena yuyaya. Yes, Prabhupada said, don't step on the shadow of a pure devotee. But many of us went on walks with Srila Prabhupada, otherwise we'd be skipping around and not able to walk with Prabhupada. Guru agya dhyachena, if you can avoid it, don't do it. Kikare upaya. As such, it is not befitting that the Guru's servant should engage in my personal service. Yet my spiritual master has given this order. What shall I do? So, there's a conflicting situation here. One is there is the etiquette. The Guru's servant or godbrother should not engage in the service of his godbrother, one personal service. And but then there's the order of the spiritual masters. So which one takes precedence? Very important. Prabhupada explains that the Guru's servants or disciples are all god brothers to one another, and as such they should respect one another as Prabhu, or master, or in feminine, Pravi. No one should disrespect his god brother. For this reason, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya what to do about Govinda. Govinda was the personal servant of Ishwara Puri, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's spiritual master, and now Ishwara Puri had ordered Govinda to become Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's personal servant. So what was to be done? This was the inquiry Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu placed before Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, an experienced friend. Bhattakahe Guru Ragya Haya Balavan Guru Agya Nach Lankiye Shastra Pramana. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, the order of the spiritual master is very strong and cannot be disobeyed. That is the injunction of the Shastras, the revealed scriptures. Sa Sushruvan Matare Bhargavena Viturniyogat Pravitam Vishadvat Pratyagrehi Grid Agraja Shashanam Tad Ogyagurunam Yavicharaniha. Being ordered by his father, Parshuram killed his mother Renuka, just as if she were an enemy. And let me explain that before you start thinking, Parshuram, is supposed to kill your mother. Parshuram did it because he knew that his father, Jamadagni, would bring his mother back to life. So there's more to the story than you can figure out just by hearing this verse. When Lakshman, the younger brother of Lord Ramchandra, heard of this, he immediately engaged himself in the service of his elder brother and accepted his orders. The order of the spiritual master must be obeyed without consideration. So, of course, blind following is not recommended. One has to really have the checks and balances of Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. Like if your Guru tells you, you go smoke marijuana, then don't have to do it. Or if he says, kill someone, don't do it. Do not do it. So this is a special case. It's quoted here. This is a quotation from the Raghuvamsha 1446. Lord Ramchandra's statement to Sita, given below, is from the Ramayana Ayodhya Kanda 22.9. Niravicharam kurur hatya maya karya mahatmanaha shreya yevam bhavatjascha mama chaiva visheshataha. The order of a great personality, like a father, must be executed without consideration because there is good fortune in such an order for both of us. In particular, there is good fortune for me. So let me explain something. For us, there's Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, checks and balances. So it's not blind following. You have to check something with the Shastra and the Sadhu if there's any question like that. And of course, if the Guru says, bring me a cup of water, you don't have to check. Call up your local Sadhu. Hey, should I bring my Guru a cup of water? And you're checking the Shastras about water. No, obviously. But if there's anything questionable, there is not supposed to be blind following. So I just really have to make that clear. We're not blind followers. These are special cases. Parshuram understood that his father could bring his mother back to life. Ram and Lakshman, they're both the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So don't imitate these personalities. Okay, so now we have time for questions. Let me just write this down so that 117 to 146 we did today. And we'll continue. Let me just stop sharing and unmute you. I see that one of our superheroes is asking a question. So, Mr. Cohen, Ms. Gopal, what is your question?
Thank you, Gurudev. In one of the earlier purports, Srila Prabhupada was saying that a Brahmana should not accept disciples outside of the Brahmana caste. But we see from the Puranas, Mahabharata, in so many cases, Brahmanas open schools specifically for Kshatriyas to teach
Yeah,
them how to use weapons. And then also Gargamuni
yeah,
um, was the spiritual master for Nanda Maharaj's family, which are Vaishyas.
yeah.
So, can you explain the discrepancy there, please?
Well, it's not really a discrepancy. The Smriti Shastras. Okay, let me explain something about the Smriti Shastras, the ritualistic Shastras. They are sometimes written down as to enable people to do bridge preaching. For example, what I mean by preaching is, for example, the Hri Bhakti Vilas. To a large extent, it's a Smriti Shastra, and I know devotees will get upset with me if I mention that, but to a large extent, it's there. What and it has things in it like don't eat carrots, and a lot of other things that we definitely don't do. And the reason for those injunctions was that so people in that society who were ritualistic brahmanas would take us seriously, and they would take up Krishna consciousness. So sometimes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So sometimes you have to put injunctions there just to impress people. Just like when Prabhupada had the deities installed in Krishna Balaram Mandir, he had the ritualistic brahmanas come and do most of the pujas. But Prabhupada said it was the actual Harinam that installed the deities. Also, when we had the deity installation in Tirumala, Tirupati, sorry, uh, Radha Govinda and the Astasakis, then we brought in the brahmanas from Tirumala, the ritualistic brahmanas, so that they would accept. I mean, they were good brahmanas and good sannyasins. I'm not going to say they're just ritualistic. But sometimes in certain situations, you have certain injunctions that may help you carry forth Krishna consciousness in certain scenarios. And that's really the point with all these different rituals and rules and regulations. And I'm not talking about the four regular principles right now. But Krishna consciousness is very simple. Uh, Unfortunately, now in ISKCON, to a large extent, that many devotees are bringing in all these different details that Prabhupada never brought in. So we're actually making things so complex that those of us who are trained by Prabhupada can't relate to certain things anymore. I mean, for example, in the deity worship, there's so many details that, in many temples I can't relate to what they're doing. And Prabhupada could certainly relate, and Prabhupada did the installation. Prabhupada gave us instructions. Prabhupada told us to turn on how to put on tilak, and then tilak becomes more complicated. Doing the achman becomes more complicated, and in many aspects, it's just like devotees have brought in many ritualistic activities that may preclude new people from joining the Christian consciousness movement because it's just you just look at all these rituals and you just think, oh my God, how can I ever learn all those things? There's all these details to learn. If I'm going to go on the altar, I'm going to need like a 3-month course in how to say Achaman. And so, it just gets so weird after, in my eyes, sorry. Although in India, it's very useful. Yes, Prabhupada said that certain things that are done in India, yes, should be done that way so that people get attracted. We have to think of what's best for preaching. But Prabhupada taught us things. He had the KISS philosophy, which is keep it simple, sadhu. And unfortunately, uh, we have the what, keep it complex, sadhu. And it's just like, just so. To me, it's something I can hardly relate to, but, whatever. I'm an old guy who can't learn new tricks. So that's really why you have all these junctions like that. Because you're preaching a particular situation. If you're preaching in a village of brahmanas, you definitely have to put all these Smriti Shastras in place so that they'll respect you. Otherwise, they're going to think, what are you doing? You have no rules and regulations. But if you're preaching in the Western world, keep it sophisticated, sadhu. The KISS philosophy. Keep it sophisticated, sadhu. If you're preaching in the Western world, you're trying to reach out to people, it gets so bewildering that nobody will join the Krishna conscious philosophy, Krishna conscious movement, because it's just so complicated.
Follow-up question, Gurudev?
Yeah.
So I understand that, but according to just the Varnashram history, um, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are both supposed to go to schools, but
Yes,
Brahmanas are the ones that are supposed
that's right.
to always be the teachers. So if the Brahmana is not allowed to take disciples that are not Brahmanas, how do the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas get their schooling?
Well, that Brahmana
Um,
is allowed, but some of these Smriti Shastras. First of all, some of the Smriti Shastras are not even bona fide
mm,
because they came about through not through a disciplic succession, and some of them were just like time, place, and circumstance injunctions. But so you have to be able to distinguish. That's why it's stated in the Mahabharata, Tako Pradishta Shruti Na Vibhina, that the Vedas are so multi branched that you cannot understand the absolute truth or even how to become Krishna conscious by reading the Vedic literatures. Only by Mahajaniyena Gata Samanta, approaching the lotus feet of a pure devotee. So that's
but
the
even
key.
if someone, but even someone doesn't want to become Krishna conscious, they just want to be a good warrior.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so those injunctions are not important, but they may be utilized in certain circumstances. I'm giving two reasons as a preaching technique to
Mm,
attract Brahmins.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one reason. Another reason is they may not even be bona fide in any case. They may be just like some deviation from parampara. Just like you have many theologians and people, or for example, the Mahabharata. Sripad Madhvacharya says in his Tatpara Niranaya, Tatparatana, Nirnaya, that the Mahabharata has been corrupted. Present editions we have in the Mahabharata. So unless something is passed down through disciplic succession, so many things get added. And like the ritual that Prabhupada talks about the Brahmin who was trying to keep his cat from joining or jumping in the fire when during the fire sacrifice, when his disciples saw that, they added that as a ritual. And then it became a ritual for practically their whole disciplic succession. So anyway, we don't follow these things. There may be use in certain circumstances, but certainly not in a Vaishnava society. So here's another one. Hare Krishna Maharaj, just wondering why we have this complacency, nonchalant approach to our spiritual life when all the facts and figures are so clear. I mean, what fuels this defiant attitude, gambling with our precious human life? Complacency comes when we become too familiar and we don't remember the goal of life. We actually just get into the details like the ritualistic brahmanas. We just get into the details or we just start to do things automatically. That's called niyamagraha by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Instruction. Mm. So that occurs. I mean, we become complacent. And, just like when we get, it's like in the material world, when we get something new, it's just there's an excitement to it. When I get a new computer, I get very excited, and after a while, I get complacent with it. It's just, hey, it's just a computer when you first get it. But that's material consciousness. So we always have to remember the goal of human life and how important, and hear regularly. Another reason why we become complacent, nonchalant, is that we don't hear regularly from the Shastras. We hear regularly from Facebook or we hear regularly from social networking or something like that, and then we hear offenses. So if we hear regularly about the importance of etiquette, the importance of Krishna consciousness, the goal of Krishna consciousness, then it's not likely we will become complacent. So, Mother Tulsi has a question. What is your question, Mother Tulsi?
Okay, so when you were, please on my base and see, when you were speaking about loving relationships, and obviously we got so many anorthas that come between us and others, but so how do we get over like projecting intentions and motives on others? I mean, because it's so hard to trust. I mean, our whole lives we've had to try to figure out what people's intentions and motives are just to
Yeah.
break those.
How to get over it? We should just appreciate whatever little devotion people do. It's like, that's the point. We shouldn't be like flies. We should be like honeybees. Prabhupada gives that example. A fly is always looking for stool. Or if you look at the moon, we look at the moon and we see spots instead of appreciating the beautiful illumination from the moon. So we have to get to the point of actually just appreciating the positive. Being like, another example Prabhupada gives, or actually the Vedas give, is be like a swan, take nectar from a filthy place. So if someone does something little, just like, all right, here's an example from Prabhupada. Thank you. Uh, Thank you, Krishna, for reminding me. Once upon a time, Prabhupada was giving a class in 26 Second Avenue. And this person, who we would call a bum or a street person, came in, brought some toilet paper, and dropped it off in the bathroom and left. And Prabhupada was just like, thank you very much. Prabhupada is accepting that service. So we should be like that. That's a good example. That even if, we always often say bum, street person, homeless, whatever, and we look at someone, yeah. But Prabhupada, he just thought, what a nice person that is. He's done this nice service for me, bringing just a roll of toilet paper. So we should be like that too. So, thank you. Any other questions? Questions or comments? You can either write your question, raise your hand, or interrupt me if you were so bold to do so. I'm going to lower your hand. Okay, who else has a question? Actually, I should mute you. No other questions. Okay, so we'll see everybody tomorrow evening, same time, same station. No, he didn't let him live in the temple. He would have. He didn't ask to live in the temple. Prabhupada left so many people live in the temple who were just like grungy as Hell. Prabhupada didn't kick him out of the temple. He just didn't want to live in the temple. But Prabhupada was very open. I'm not saying that we should be so open and just let anybody who wanders in live in the temple, but we should be accepting whatever service people are doing and appreciate that service and not see the negative side, which we are very prone to do. We should see the positive side. Whatever someone does. Just like, all right, there's the other example Prabhupada gave. Once upon a time, there was a rat on the altar. And the ghee lamp was going to be extinguished. And the rat just went by the ghee lamp, and somehow or other, the rat, by going by the ghee lamp, the wick stood up again, and the ghee lamp was not extinguished. And of course, the rat was cremated, but and the rat went back to Godhead. I mean, so Krishna, hey Krishna, Karna Sindhu, Dina Bandhu Jagatpate. Gopesha Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostate. We should not be condemning people. We'd be so happy when people come to the temple. We should be like good host, Atiti Narayan. Someone comes to the temple. Thank you for coming to the temple. Would you like anything? Would you like prasadam? We should treat them like God. Not so much that we put them on the altar, But that's the point. Atiti Narayan. If someone comes even without an appointment, yes, would you like some prashadam? What would you like? Would you like to see the deities? Are you interested? Do you have any questions? But instead, what we do with people when they come to the temple is we say, well, get away. No time to talk to you. Or we say, you're not the body. You're spirit soul. Yes, in New Orleans, I had the homeless not come for class, but we gave them prashadam. I mean, obviously, the reason I couldn't they couldn't come for class is because I couldn't breathe. I had trouble breathing when they were sitting there. They took their shoes off and their socks hadn't been cleaned for 3 years. You know, it's pretty obnoxious. Anyway, but I still was interested in their welfare. Okay, oh, I think Braja Lila has a question. Okay,
Hi, Valverde. Please accept my obeisances. I
blessings.
I was reflecting on like the Krishna consciousness becoming more complex, and it like really started to frustrate me. I think because I have a need for people feeling comfortable and like bringing people to Krishna consciousness, and I also have a personal need and attraction to Krishna consciousness because of the universality of it, and like not the organized religion parts.
Yeah,
And so I was wondering what would be a solution to something like that? Like first, in a solution to us getting too attached to all the principles, which I think you already answered, but also second, how to share with people so that's not what they see. Do we create like spaces for people outside of really ritualistic temples,
yeah. We
or
have to have
what do
we
you
have to have safe spaces for people outside of the temples where people can feel comfortable and get a lot of prasadam, hear the philosophy, and
do you,
also, you know, when people actually desire to commit, we should allow people not to have to learn all these different, you know, unnecessary details. You know,
and like
it's
live in the temple and have to do all those sorts of formalities?
yeah. Obviously, there's things like Mangalarti that are nice and chanting Hare Krishna that are
Yeah.
nice. That's simply forward. But you know, like if I was to join the movement now, I would probably be very discouraged with deity worship. Not really even. I wouldn't want to go on the altar,
Right.
even though I like worshiping the deities because everything is just so ritualistic and so complex. And in the beginning, I was the head pujari in the temple after 1 week or 2 weeks in the movement. Of course, we were worshiping a picture of Panchatattva. But, you know, because things were so simple and it was just Krishna and me serving. I didn't have to get into all these little details of counting how many circles around another circle around another circle. You know, if I wanted to do that, counting, I would have continued in the university and taken more advanced mathematics. Anyway, I know some people will be upset with me for saying this. If some people like it, let them do it. I have nothing, I have no problem with people. You know, you got people with complicated brains and let them have a life for their complicated brains. My brain is very simple, except when I'm dealing with science and mathematics, then it becomes very complex. So everybody should serve according to their capacity. But why impose complexity in spiritual life? Because it's very simple. You chant Hare Krishna and you're happy. Okay, we have to end now because it's time for me to eat prasadam and be happy, or else I will not be happy. And then I have to go to the temple in a few minutes to have a reception where they bathe my feet. So I need to have my feet bathed. Because, anyway, got to have a sannyasi has to have his feet bathed on a regular basis, and a pedicure